Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul,
and Jolene.
and today we're talking about running a game for brand new players. Running a game for people who've never played is a little bit different than any other game that you might run.
Yes, I concur.
What kind of things should you consider when running a game for brand new players? As a GM, if you're given the important task of introducing players to the hobby of RPGs, what considerations are pretty important? There's some pretty important things you should probably consider.
It depends on the age of the people.
Age, that's true, of the group that you're playing. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, running a game for children and teenagers, and then older teenagers, and then adults might be a little bit different. It might be a different tact or different angle that you want to apply to running a game for those different groups.
Yeah, for kids, you want it to be simple and easy and help them to learn. Make sure the first adventure is fun for them, right?
Right.
You don't necessarily have to be a rules lawyer and kill them off because they accidentally stepped in your trap or something like that.
Yeah, I think you should definitely consider the age of your customers, right? In this case, of the people who are going to play in your game. Little kids, I'm going to say little kids, as young as, when I go to the convention, sometimes I run in the kids' room, and I did run quite a bit of games when when my son was young, and because I wanted him to be able to play in games at the convention. So to ensure that, I ran kids games in the kids' room. Luckily, we had very good kids rooms in the local cons that were run very well by people who really knew what they were doing, and I had a lot of fun. I ran for kids as young as probably around 7 through about 12 in the kids room, because then they can go into the teen room if they're 13. So by the time my son turned 13, though, he didn't want to go into the teen room. He didn't want to.
He wanted to play with the big boys.
Yeah, so he would just go straight to regular scheduled games, and he's done so pretty good so far. So, but playing for brand new kids, that might be different than playing for kids that already have played a little bit.
But I think the same rules would apply if they've never experienced the game. What do they want to play? What genre do they want to play? Do they want to play D&D? Is probably the easiest fantasy genre for kids because there's fun. But there's also like Gamma World. You run Gamma World for kids.
A lot of different times. I mean, multiple times I ran Gamma World, and it was a lot of fun. And in fact, some of the kids would come back to the same kids would come back to my game. There was I forget the name, but there was a Connor and his little sister. They would come and play in my games. Of course, Augustine would play, but I would have these repeat kids come back to my game, like, oh, you're gonna run it, yeah. And so they would come back and run, and I had the same characters for them, so they were very excited to be able to take their character back, because I would have pre-made characters, obviously.
But when you're running for kids, especially if they haven't played before, you want to make it exciting. You want to make it fun. You want to make it light. You don't want anything serious for kids, right?
No.
You want them to. I think your Gamma World game, they were looking for gobble gobbles or something like that.
Yeah, gobble gobbles are big turkey.
One of the games I've run for kids is to make them have fun. I put in lots of little pseudo dragons and little creatures that were meant to be there maybe as one thing, but the kids turned them into their friends and things like that.
Almost like pets and stuff.
So it was just the game I ran for kids usually is just, you need to go find these kids and rescue them.
Right.
That kind of thing. So they're excited about doing this, right? And there's nothing scary, nothing, even if they come across things, I let them roll the dice as many times as they wanted, and I did all kinds of things. It was a fun game for kids. It wasn't necessarily by the rules, or it wasn't. So if somebody has been watching a live play, and wants to experience the game as an adult, this is not going to be the thing that you want to do, right?
Unfortunately, we were still playing Pathfinder at the time, right?
Yeah.
And so you ran a kid's Pathfinder game.
Yes.
Which Pathfinder may not be the most little kid-friendly game there is out there. For brand new people who have never played before, even though our son started playing Pathfinder when he was about 7 or 8, simply because
that was what was available.
Yeah, it was available, and I guess I could have gone and said, "Oh, we could play AD&D," which I think is a little bit simpler without all the number crunching. But I think it worked out well in the end playing Pathfinder. But yeah, we were playing Pathfinder at the time. D&D 5th edition had come out, and that's a heck of a game system to try to get little kids to start to play with. Luckily, you had people in there. We had people in mixed with with the brand new kids that knew how to play. You had our
Not
son,
only
and
and
you had
yeah, our friends'
our
kids.
friends play.
But not only that, but when you're playing with, and I told the boys, just let them roll the dice. It doesn't matter if they hit or not. Just let them roll it until they hit, and let them have fun. And although the boys balked at that for a second, then they're like, "Oh, I see what you mean," because they were little kids. They were like between 7 and 10,
They were
right?
tiny.
And
they were tiny. And our sons were like what, 8 or 9? I mean, they didn't.
they were a little bit older.
They didn't
but
seem like
they were more experienced.
Yeah, the age wasn't the difference. The difference was experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
And once they got the idea that we were there to make sure that these people had fun, and they got to have fun too, because they got to do crazy stuff
stunts, yeah.
and make everybody laugh and have fun doing stuff. But I think that's the most important thing for the first game, is that it's not necessarily a serious game, right? Like,
yeah. Well, it depends on the
topics that are gonna cause people pain or anything.
It depends. Again, everything depends on the group you are introducing to role playing games. You know, if they're all adults and they want to play, you know, if their interest is Cthulhu, then you're gonna run a Cthulhu-like game. If
Right.
they've all read Cthulhu or H.P. Lovecraft and want to experience that kind of game, I heard there's a game based on the H.P. Lovecraft, and we're all H.P. Lovecraft fans. Oh, okay. Then you're gonna run H.P. Lovecraft storyline, and it's gonna be spooky and weird and stuff like that, and it's something that they like. So part of deciding what game to run as the GM is the table, is who are you running the game for. Along with age comes interest, right? What if like I said, Call of Cthulhu fans probably want to play a Call of Cthulhu game. They probably, that would really be interesting to them. You could run Champions, a superhero game. You could, but
But if they're Call of Cthulhu fans, they're not
yes,
gonna want one.
well, not that we're not going to want to, but I think you should push their buttons, right? You should push the things that make them tick. If they really like Call of Cthulhu and they do, then by all means run a Call of Cthulhu game. The only problem is,
or find someone who knows how to run a Call of Cthulhu game.
only problem is if you never ran, then
That's gonna be harder.
that's a little bit harder. But I think anything, if you're catering to a group of people and you don't necessarily have a lot of experience with that game, the other thing I was going to say is play a game that you have a lot of experience with. But let's say you have a lot of experience with Pathfinder and they're not really interested in a high fantasy game. They're interested in science fiction. The group comes from a science fiction book club. Well, what are you going to do? Well, Pathfinder now has, what's it called?
Stargazer,
Starfinder.
but some star whatever.
But let's say they're interested in The Expanse. So there's an Expanse book out there, or you can use one of these core books that can use for any genre, like GURPS, Genesis, and there might be a couple other ones that I can't think of at the moment. But use a generalistic rules and apply the skin of whatever game that they want to play, and just keep it simple, right? They're not that experienced with role playing games, or have no experience with role playing games. So provide a fun adventure that they're gonna enjoy.
So that includes you want to provide the characters for them. I would say if they want to make their own characters and stuff, that's fine, but maybe not for the first game. Give them an idea. See, just make characters and let them pick.
Yeah, I think if they've never played role playing games, then they have no concept of making a character. So if you hand them a character,
they may have heard about it.
They may have heard about it. We're talking about people who've never played before. Then I think it cuts a lot of time, maybe a little bit of a headache, and people getting kind of bored with the idea of making a character. And some character making processes are really
difficult,
really long.
Yes.
Right, making a character for
especially when they say you need to come up with a backstory, and you're like going, you've never played this before. You're like, is this a test or a game?
Well, like making a game for what is it, Shadowrun, new Star Wars games, that would take too much time out of the first session. Also, how long is their session going to be? Is it going to be a 4-hour session, 2 hours? I've heard of games being played in 2 hours, even at conventions. They go 2 hours. Wow, that's kind of crazy. 2, 4, 5, 6, 8-hour game. I mean, we're in for a long haul.
I'd say you want to not make it more than 4 hours for their first game.
In that case, you really have to jump into the adventure.
Right.
So pre-made characters definitely help in that sense. I think we used we did tackle this on a brand new GM. If you're a brand new GM, what do you want to do? Some of these might overlap a little bit, but these right now we're talking about brand new players that you that you know have never played before. So pre-made characters. Again, pick a subject that that the players are into. You know, they may not all be into science fiction, right? But if you know most of them really like the Lord of the Rings or the Expanse novels and or TV show. You know, there's almost a book, there's an RPG for almost any genre. I listen to, or I'm on a mailing list for Modifius, and they sent me they have a Fallout RPG. They're gonna have Fallout RPG. They're gonna have a Dishonored RPG coming out. Then there's Dune coming out. So, Jolene just kind of rolls her eyes at Dune because she didn't like the movies or the book. But it's a huge, there's a huge fan base for a lot of these games, right?
Yes.
These subjects.
Yes.
Not games yet. Some of these haven't been made, but there's this huge number of people out there who love.
But like Saul says, you can take a generic Roll20 system, or you could take a GURPS or something and make it easy for everybody to know. And you can make the rules light for their first game.
Right.
I think that you should make it fun. You should make it not too serious. You should make it like maybe a little mystery to solve, or
right.
If it's a high adventure game, they need to go and rescue the princess or something like that. It depends on the people and what they want. I would cut out too much fighting scenes, which you tend to take a long time, but you could have a small one in there just so they can see what it's like.
Right.
But you don't want to get too rules heavy if you want them to come back and they're not into rules heavy stuff.
So much
since
depends,
they're new, they don't know.
So much depends on the group that you're running. But if you don't know any of that, wow, you just know that they've never played before. That's pretty tough. I think running something that almost everybody knows, like the D&D, is not a bad choice. D&D is not probably the easiest system to learn, but we played it when we were 11 years old. My son started playing Pathfinder when he was 8, so it's not entirely difficult. It's not prohibitively difficult to run those kind of games. But I really think that if you can hit something that the group might like, or that they like, then running the game in that genre. But in that genre is probably a pretty good thing. Rules light, yes. Rules light systems are out there. Some Fate Accelerated is probably pretty rules light. There is, I can't think of another one.
You probably don't want to start them off with Shadowrun, where you have to figure out not only how to make your character, but everything involves calculation.
You could have out pre-made characters, but still, the mechanic, unless you keep the mechanic really simple, right? Unless I've done it with space opera. So funny thing is that I put down here, you probably don't want to run space opera, but I ran space opera at conventions. But there were people who knew how to play role-playing games, but they had never played space opera before. So
space opera is very crunchy.
Very crunchy, right? So I would stay away from something like space opera and Shadowrun. But space opera was just the combat was kind of crazy. There was to hit. You had to roll to hit. You had to roll. There was modifiers from the attacker, modifiers from the defender. There was penetration rules of armor. There were
lots of charts involved.
There's lots of charts. Yeah, there's
and percentile
hit
bias.
Location tables, right? Hit
yes.
Location tables.
And my question was, do I have to roll high or low? That's always my question in space opera.
Yeah, it would change too.
And it would change, and that's why I had to ask the question every time.
It wasn't a well. I would say it was a well thought out game, but like there's certain games now where the goal is always to roll low, right? No matter what you're doing. Whether you're fighting, whether you're trying to think of something, or it's the reverse, you're trying to roll high. But in space opera, it would go back and forth. And then there was like the hit location tables. There was the severity of the wound table. Was it a light hit, a raising hit, moderate hit, or whatever? So probably wouldn't use all the rules of space opera. When I ran it at conventions, I really took away a lot of that stuff and just use like damage table. I didn't really care where you hit people and stuff like that. So, but I had modified it a little bit.
Yeah.
So you could modify Shadowrun easy. You look at the basic character sheet and say, "Oh, just add this skill to this attribute and roll the dice. If you roll a 5 or 6, you make it."
Right.
don't have to include, well, under these circumstances,
You
know.
have this many soak dice and blah 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 and blah.
Yeah,
blah,
I
blah.
definitely simplify stuff. I think,
Especially if your goal is to get these people to want to play more.
well,
No, I'm serious because you
I
want
guess if
to.
the goal, yeah, if your goal is to make sure that they never ever play ever again, yeah, go ahead, rush out, run with all the rules. Yeah, but I guess again, what's your intent as a GM? Are you trying to eliminate other people from playing, or are you trying to bring people into the fold, right?
So this is a topic that is topical because there's so many live plays out there. So people see live plays from what Critical Role, and there's a couple.
Acquisitions Incorporated or
Yeah,
any other people you can see.
and they really want to play those games, right? So there may be expectations that you may not know are there, right? I saw them playing this game. I've watched the whole season and that's what I want. And if you haven't watched that season or you don't know what they're talking about, then
Yes, yeah, right. Where are these players coming from? Are they coming from people who watch Critical Role and they've?
because they're going to have a high expectations of your table if that's where they're coming from. Because those are voice actors and actors who, I mean, they play D&D but they're
also actors, right?
They're actors,
so
right?
They use that talent.
So you're going to be sitting at a table with people who don't really know how to do that, but
Maybe.
want to.
Maybe, yeah. Yes. Where does this interest come from to play a role playing game? Does it come from watching it on TV shows like?
If they want to play Doctor Who and they know more about Doctor Who than you, then you're, that kind of thing.
No, yeah, there's that. But I'm talking about like if they watched what's that? Stranger Things.
Mm-hmm.
If they watched Big Bang Theory, there's games being played, role playing games being played in that game. But is it the way most people play? I think most times when they show it, it's not. That's not how you usually play a role playing game. They play an exaggerated version of role playing.
Yes.
Community had one episode about Dungeons and Dragons, and it was hilarious and funny, but that's not the way a
Well, even
usual
Big Bang
session.
Theory, Sheldon rolls dice to tell you what happens. He has a chart that tells you what happens. That's like a really old style, right?
Well, no, it never existed. That's more like a choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
Right? That's what it is. And nobody runs games like that. Nobody runs games to see what you encounter. But I don't think I haven't come across a game like that. So where does your audience come from? Another thing to consider, especially like you said, if they come from Critical Role or watching other people play, then that's something that you got to consider.
It may not change your style at all, but it gives you an idea to know what they may be expecting. Because a lot about role playing is expectations, and
yes,
anything is expectations.
Well, and then there's interest based on TV shows like Game of Thrones, right? If they watch Game of Thrones, if they watch The Expanse, if they watched any show if they watch Downton Abbey. I want to play a role-playing game based on Downton Abbey. I heard there's a role-playing game based on Downton Abbey, right? And would you want, so that's a totally different game than if they watched Terminator, right?
Right.
I want to play Terminator. Okay, there is a game Terminator. No, there is. I don't think there is. But or Downton Abbey. Those two groups of people, I'm gonna want totally different type of games, right? I'm just telling you, they don't want Downton Abbey,
they're not going to want Terminators.
Mr. Darcy's not going to pull out his blunderbuss and start blowing people away, as he walks down the halls of Downton Abbey.
Mr. Darcy's not in Downton Abbey.
Well, same difference, right? Same difference, same genre. That's something that you got to consider is where these players are coming from, at least as far as what brings them to the table. It could, like I say, it could be based on the movies, TV shows, MMOs. I played World of Warcraft, and there's a World of Warcraft role-playing game. Yes, there was. Yes, there was. I don't think it's not in print anymore. But if you're coming from that kind of genre, that kind of group of people, well, is a role-playing game. Yeah, it's a role-playing game, and MMO is supposed to be a role-playing game,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is everybody you talk to, an experience bag and loot dropper, right? Ching! I hit you, and all kinds of coins fall out of you. That might be a different game than if you want to study or not study, but run a game based on a mystery of who killed whatever.
So I think some of the things you should also consider are you don't want the game to be too serious. You want it to be fun for the first
Right.
game.
Yes, definitely.
it's a game. It's not a test. A lot of people that sit down, new players that sit down to role playing games, are going to feel. Some of them, when you ask them, "What do you do?" may have no idea what you mean.
Yes. Yeah.
So you might want to, have a little conversation about that. I'm going to put out the scenario, and I'm going to ask each of you what it is you want to do. And if they look confused or scared, then move on to somebody else. Somebody, or maybe have somebody at the table who knows what they're doing to kind of help a little bit
Yes.
to be the first person to talk, so that people can get comfortable with it, right?
Elicit help from your friends. Maybe plant an experienced player in the group. That would definitely help. But you don't want
Them to run the whole game.
right?
Yeah.
And I guess have a talk to the people before you start playing, because people say, well, you could do anything you want. Okay, I'm gonna flap my wings and fly into the castle. Well, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. Okay, I'm gonna teleport myself into the treasure room.
You don't have that skill.
Okay, well, you said I could do anything I wanted. So understand there's
What the characters
yes.
can do that you're
what
playing.
exactly?
Yeah.
Not exactly, but what are the parameters that
Yeah.
that the people can do?
Then-
Some games you could do that,
Yeah.
right?
And you want to make sure that they know that it's a cooperation game. You don't want to kill your fellow players.
Ah, yes, the murder hobo that comes out, and yes, that would probably be difficult to. Well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that'd be difficult to. Not difficult, but I think there's some people who that's the way they want to play, right? They think that's the way they want to play, or that's what they want to do. Unless the whole group wants to be that way, I would say definitely put the kibosh on something like that, because that could really piss somebody off who's getting killed or robbed or whatever, and that's not what you're trying to do. I'm hoping you're trying to keep people or bring people
into the hobby.
not push them away. Some people have said that before. They have had such horrible experiences when they first played ever that they never went back until years later when a friend of theirs playing role playing games goes, and they said, "Oh, I tried that years ago, but it was terrible." And then once they played with a non ridiculous group or non murder hobo group or whatever it was, they really enjoyed it. They go, "Oh, this is actually really fun." And then, obviously they had a horror story to start off with, but yeah, you don't want to be that somebody's horror story, right? You don't want to run a game that drives people away. At least,
hopefully you don't.
Hopefully you don't. If you do, you're probably not listening to my.
I think it's important that you make sure that they know the GM is their friend, not their adversary.
Yes, it's not you against them, and a lot of people think it is. Even experienced players, who play a lot of games, think that it's an adversarial situation, that it's the GM versus the players. Which I hate to tell you, but the players will always lose because the GM can do anything they want, right? They literally can do anything they want.
They can teleport things.
Unlike the players, right? Yeah. Okay. Dragon teleports on top of you,
and this comes from
kills you.
From those who's been playing since D&D was around, came about, right? The idea that sometimes the GM seemed adversarial. Maybe he was at that time, but GMs today are not necessarily adversarial. If they are, then you may not want to play in their games.
Right.
It depends on the kind of game you want. And a lot of people have a problem with that because they do think the GM is trying to kill them. And I have friends who they're rules lawyers because of that, right? They want to make sure that
they get a fair shake.
Yeah. So you don't want that.
Another resource I like to use are quick start rules, because the quick start rules are usually available through either drive-through RPG or PDF format, and so some of them are printed. If you go to, they have an RPG day where they give out free stuff, and sometimes they print these quick start rules. So what I like about quick start rules or starter box sets, D&D has one, Star Wars has one. A lot of games have started to use the box sets of starter sets, which include nice, colorful printouts of character sheets with pictures and stuff. And I think those are really neat. I think if you can get your hands on one for the game that you want to run, it helps you quite a bit. Has a really nice, pretty sheet that the players will like. Ooh, wow, this is really neat. Also, they usually include a quick adventure that's meant to be played in a short amount of time, and they're not very difficult. They're not too complicated, So I definitely would look for quick start rules if they're available for the game that you're running.
And if not, maybe just with each character sheet and make it pretty, just like if you're running a game for a convention or something. Print out pictures of the characters, print out pictures of the bad guys,
Right.
and or whatever, however you do it. Get the figures out, make a little. Some people have all the scenery and everything. That make all those kind of things are extras because you don't need them,
Right.
but it might make the game more exciting for
Right.
new players.
And then like I don't usually do this, but Jolene's always used them, and I'm a worse GM for not using it. Is the pictures of the encounters, right? So if you're playing, even if you're playing D&D, and these people have never played D&D before, and you go, oh, it's you don't just you describe a shambling mound, but they're like, wow, what is a shambling? Your description, words are sometimes very hard. It's very hard to convey description sometimes, and if you're not very talented in that area, you whip out a picture of a shambling mountain, and because they're new players, they're like, "Oh my God, look at that thing!" Well, they may not, grasp exactly what you're,
They're not going to know what
to.
a cobalt looks like, or they're
Right.
not going to know what a dire wolf is. I mean, they may have ideas, but
A dire wolf maybe, but a kobold or goblin, well, what's the difference? Okay, here you go. Like, oh yeah, okay, then you can see the difference, right?
the same thing with like you're describing a spaceship to them. They're not going to necessarily. Is it a Star Trek spaceship, or is it a? Do you
Oh
talk
yeah,
to the computer and it does what you want it to, or
right.
is it a what is it, Firefly spaceship where you have to hit stuff with hammers to get it to work?
Oh, the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, or of
So
course.
any kind of pictures or anything that's going to be helpful.
Yeah, visual aids as they
Is
say.
visual aids, and also that helps people to have the same idea in their head because everybody's
Right.
going to have a different picture in their head of what's happening.
Yes, especially if you're just describing things, everybody's gonna have like a slightly different picture in their head about what you're talking about, or have a total misconception, which is
Right.
something
And
you don't want to have.
maps are good. Maps are always helpful. Any kind of props that you would use for your regular players. Obviously, if you run games all the time, you're going to have that, right? But
Right.
if you don't, you have a mat and you're drawing stuff. Pictures do help, right?
Yes, I think maybe
And it helps role playing too if you can show them stuff, right? And then you put a voice to it, or you say, this guy comes up to you and he talks and he says this,
Right.
And what do you say? You could ask him, and then if they're inexperienced, obviously they are, since they've never played before. You say, when someone comes up and talks to you, ask them questions, figure out what's going on, that kind of thing, right?
Yes, yeah. Be a good ambassador of this hobby, and maybe you run games for your friends all the time, but if you're running for like brand new players, maybe step up your game. Like Jolene says, use scenery, use figures. If you just use a mat, and everybody enjoys that because of expediency, but you bring out a little bit of scenery, either like trees and stuff like that. I think it makes it pretty cool, and people really it. Really, brings people into the game. When they see stuff like that, especially the pictures and anything and maps. If you have maps of stuff, that just eliminates confusion or misthinking about misinterpreting what you said, and it really brings people into the game, especially if they've never played. I mean, new players are like, wow, oh, this is really neat,
And the more you get them immersed into the scenario, into the game, the more role playing that is actually done, the more likely they're going to come back and want to do it again.
Right. In fact, I didn't have a whole table of brand new players, but I had this. I was running Star Trek, and I had this one lady who was never played before and wasn't that much of a Star Trek fan. But her boyfriend was a Star Trek fan. Anyway, so
Hence the reason she was the new player.
So I asked her what she was doing, and she froze. I go, no problem, just think about it. This is your this is your role in the ship, but you don't have to necessarily do exactly what you think that entails. You can do anything you want. And so slowly but surely she came out of that new person shell where but she was kind of intimidated by other people who might have been intimidated by other people at the
Star
table.
Trek brings out the people that you got Star Trek fans, right? And they love it. Some of them dress up and they come with their A game, and that can be intimidating
Yeah.
to someone who has never played before. So, but it can also be an exciting experience because you see how excited these people are, and as long as the GM isn't looking at you going, "And what are you going to do now? You need to tell me now," then you'll be okay. But if you do that, that person may never come back.
Realize that if you get into any kind of encounter, they may do things that most experienced players would not do.
But just let it go, right?
Or like make mistakes. Like, well, you might want to like counsel them. Like, well, if you do that, the chances of you being successful are really low, and the chances of you surviving are really also very low. So, are you sure your character would think there's, help them out in that sense?
Yeah.
Because a lot of players, they have no idea. There's they don't have the idea of consequences for their actions in a game. So like, well, if I can do anything I want, that's the conception that most players, new players have. Then, I just could do it, right? There's no, explain as the GM to your players that, okay, there's times where you will not be able to do things automatically. That's what the dice are for, and they propel a story that we don't know what the ending is going to be. So if you do something that's really crazy, then your chances for success are really low. But it'd be really fantastic if you do. But the chances for harm are really high too. So that's something that might be something that a new player will definitely have a problem with is consequences for their actions, because everybody thinks that, oh, I can do anything I want. I should be able to do it because it's a role playing game. No, it's not quite that way.
So if you're lucky enough to get to run a game for new players, try to make it as exciting as possible. Try to make it as easy as possible for them to enjoy, and make it so they want to come back and play more.
Right. You make it as fun as you can make it. And that's what success is. That's how you measure success, is by how much fun you're having. And if you're having fun and you're presenting a fun game, then I think that's the best way to go.
Hopefully you'll have new players and you'll get to run a game for new players. Have fun. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
You have a good day.